Thank you for joining this session. My name is Anne from Orchid Systems, and today I'm going to go through customer satisfaction, why you should monitor it, why you should look to increase your customer satisfaction, and what Orchid modules can assist in this endeavor. For those of you who are new to Orchid Systems, at this stage we have our modules running in over 5,000 sites around the world. They're in fact in over 60 countries, and on average, most customers run 2 of our modules per site. We are supported by over 400 business partners around the world, and all our modules are to do with improving efficiency and productivity when using Sage 300. We're based in Sydney, Australia, and have over 10 industry awards for our software and our service. At this stage, we have 13 modules integrated with Sage 300. And when I say integrated, I mean they're developed 100% in the Sage 300 SDK. And what this means for you and your customers is that our modules look and feel exactly like a Sage 300 core module. They support all the same utilities and functions that the Sage 300 core modules do. For example, dump and load, the same import-export routines, the backup routines, data integrity checks, and so on. And we've been in business for over 25 years, writing Sage 300 modules. I mentioned we had 13 modules. This is the list of our modules, which largely fall into these 5 main categories. Collaboration and intelligence, where we have Info Explorer, our BI tool, Notes and Document Management Link, which display context-sensitive notes and documents. And I'll be running through briefly all those 3 modules today. Automation and productivity, we have Process Scheduler that allows you to schedule recurring repetitive Sage 300 tasks, such as posting batches, run day ends, integrity checks, but also your own custom processes. So I'll be running through that briefly today. And we also have Report Runner, which is the ability to create menus of crystal and financial reports, pre-answer the parameters, and then run them using Process Scheduler. Another category is tailoring your system and integration. And in this section, we have extender, data views, and optional tables, all of which provide different means of customizing and tailoring the Sage 300 system to suit exact business processes. And I'll be running through some aspects of extender today. In streamlining financial processes, we have EFT processing, electronic funds processing, which allows for the electronic funds transfer of vendor payments, customer refunds or customer direct debits, and just recently US and Canadian payroll. We also have inter-entity trade and inter-entity transactions, which is the ability to automate transactions between a group of companies, either trading on behalf of each other or trading between each other. And in the operations management, we have return material authorizations, allowing you to track and monitor and control the returns process, and bin tracking, which allows for extra granularity in tracking your stock, in as much as you can create multiple bins per IC location, and then any movement of items in and out of the warehouse needs to be tracked, not only which location it is, but which bin it's coming from or going to. And I'll be running through our return material authorizations as well today. So customer satisfaction or customer dissatisfaction. Many studies show that the majority, or the biggest indicator of customer satisfaction or dissatisfaction is not only to do with the product or service that you're selling. This one particular study is saying in as many as 75% of cases, what drives customer satisfaction or dissatisfaction has nothing to do with the product or services you're selling them or the price you're charging for them. It's rather how you deliver that, the product, and the interaction the customer has with them. So using this simple pyramid to understand what levers you have in driving or increasing or decreasing customer satisfaction, we can see that sitting on top of the core product or service that you deliver is the systems and processes that you use to deliver that product. How you do it, how you manage to do that, your technical performance. Did you send out the correct item at the correct price? Did it have all the QA documentation that it needed? Was it sent out on time? Did that process meet your customers' expectations? And finally, the interaction that you have with your customers, be it by email, text, whether you're calling them or on a web page. If all of these, if your infrastructure and processes support effective customer service, if the way it's delivered is consistent and meets your customers' expectations, that is done in every contact that you have with the customer. So not just in the sales process, but also in the returns process or in the inquiry process on a billing, absolutely every single contact with the customer, if it's all supporting their expectations, then the emotion that you'll elicit from the customer would be a positive one as opposed to a dissatisfied one. And why would you want to, have great customer satisfaction? And in fact, more than just having satisfied customers, why would you want to have a raving fan? Well, studies have shown that raving fans essentially do your marketing for you. They cost you less. They recommend you to their friends and colleagues, and effectively increase your marketing exponentially. And studies have also shown that if you're recommended something by somebody you trust, you're more likely to go along with that recommendation than look into it too closely or look for other services. So a referral from a friend or a colleague is much more effective than any marketing you could do. So how do we get raving fans, and why do we exactly want raving fans? Initially, you need to establish a vision for your customer service and a vision of what satisfaction levels that you want for your customers. And how you're going to achieve that in very broad terms. Then you need to listen to the customer and measure where they are now, what they like about what you're doing, what they don't like about what you're doing. And based on that, examine what the don't likes that they're suggesting. And you can't tackle everything at once, so choose your priority, choose which ones which are maybe small bite-sized chunks, ones which are easy to implement, or ones that will give you the biggest bang for buck initially. Make a change in your processes, and then closely monitor that change is being implemented consistently by all. And then you would go around the loop again, listen to your customer, see hopefully that you've noticed a change in the processes that you've been changing, reprioritize your list, decide which ones you're going to act on, make a change, and monitor for consistency. And one method that you can use to monitor for consistency is the Net Promoter Score. I'll describe the Net Promoter Score in more detail, but what it can indicate to you, it's a tool, a simple, easy tool to use to listen to the customer, and can therefore, if you've implemented a change and then you listen again to the customer, it can check whether you've been monitoring and implementing that change correctly, and indeed if that change was the right one to do. So your Net Promoter Score is a very simple, quick questionnaire to your customer on a scale of 1 to 10. Would you recommend our goods or services? And then a simple question, why did you answer that way? So it's not a long 15, 20-minute survey, which I'm sure you've all been subject to, which halfway through you just don't have time to finish off. Just a very simple question. They've got to answer between 1 and 10, and then an optional field, why did you rate us that way? So 0 would be not likely at all. We're not likely at all to recommend you. And 10 would be extremely likely to recommend you. And then you gather up all those scores. Your promoters are 9 or 10. They're extremely likely to recommend you. Your detractors are 6 and below. They're not likely to recommend you at all. And your passives are, they're neither recommending or bad-mouthing you. So those are the ones you want to concentrate on and move them up into the promoter area, as you do want to move the detractors, if you can, up into passive or promoter areas. Then you take your percentage of promoters, you subtract your percentage of detractors, and that gives you the Net Promoter Score. And a high Net Promoter Score or a raving fan typically is an indicator of a loyal customer. They're more likely to repurchase from you, spend more with you, and the cost of servicing that is normally much lower because you don't have returns, you don't have lots of inquiries, and they're recommending your services on, so you're getting other customers through those particular customers. So that's the point of concentrating on customer service and trying to increase it to increase your ultimate bottom line. So to increase customer satisfaction, you need to empower your team in all your processes. You need to be giving them the right process, the information they need at the right time, and in fact, the right information. So what I'm going to run through today is two things. One, how you can track your NPS using Orchid modules. And for this, what I'll be discussing is using Extender to create a table in your Sage 300 company to track the NPS score for each of the surveys that you send out, and also using notes to record information and display information about the Net Promoter Score around those processes that you want to, that it makes sense to have this information readily to hand. We're going to use Info Explorer to analyze the Net Promoter Score results and to analyze other information in our Sage 300 data space. And we're going to use Process Scheduler to automate certain tasks around the collection of the Net Promoter Score. I'm also going to look at the returns process. The returns process is one in which when the customer contacts you, there's already something that has gone wrong. So they are already in a negative frame of mind. And how you can change their negative frame of mind to a positive experience if the return is handled well. And in order for your team to handle returns well, they need a system to manage the returns, so a process and a procedure to follow so that they can consistently and effectively deal with the return in a fast, efficient manner. And for that, we'll be using return material authorizations. And we're going to, I'm going to show how using a document management link and notes and Extender, we can customize the returns process, the RMA process to exactly match the requirements of this particular company. And we'll be showing the invoice at the same time as you're processing the return. We'll be showing some notes which may affect the way you deal with this particular return. And we'll be showing the latest Net Promoter Score to the person entering the return so they know where the current mood of the customer and where you stand with the customer. What I won't be showing, but is also part of the returns process, is if you do need to issue a refund, you could use EFT processing to do the refund to the customer. So, once you've decided to refund the customer, if it then takes a month to get the check produced and signed and sent off to them, it's as good as an insult to the customer. If you said, yep, we'll refund you that, if they don't receive the money pretty quickly, it's also a negative experience for them. And I'll be referring to using bin tracking to more accurately track your inventory and how you could ensure, for example, that the correct item goes out each time as opposed to perhaps sending the wrong item to the customer. So I'll be running through Info Explorer. In this particular screenshot, I'm showing the Net Promoter Score for Orchid Limited. We've done 2 surveys in 2019 and 2020, and we'll look at the Net Promoter Scores, the detractors percentage, the promoters percentage by customer group, because it can vary. Although in this case, I've got a positive Net Promoter Score for the whole company, we can see the experience of the customers in the wholesale group and the retail group is quite different. So you need to be analyzing at the correct level, at each level where the process might differ. And I'm also going to be running through RMA processing. So the ability to create a return material authorization, to use template codes so that you can tailor the process for each of the individual returns or repairs processes that you might have. For example, if you're doing a warranty repair, you would be probably issuing your spare parts at no charge, and you would be insisting on an invoice for each of the items that you're doing a repair on. Whereas a normal repair, you might say you don't mind what invoice you sold it on. You might not have even sold the item, and you are going to charge for spare parts. And all of that can be controlled through your templates. And I'm going to be looking at notes, the ability to attach a note to the actual process. So this note belongs to the process, the return material process. You look at document management link to attach the relevant documents to the process that you're doing. So rather than saying to the customer, oh, I'll go and find the invoice and I'll give you a call back, they've got the invoice straight away and can answer any questions for the customer. Using extender notes, we're going to display the last Net Promoter Score that we have from this customer, and that may or may not influence the way you deal with this return. And using notes, we'll look at the last time somebody recorded a note for this customer. Somebody was doing some analysis and noticed this trend, so recorded it against the customers so that next time we're doing an order and or a return or a billing inquiry, we've got the picture of the customer to hand. So I'm just going to go and demonstrate these modules to you. So first of all, I'm going to look at creating a return and what features RMA has in helping you effectively and efficiently deal with the return. So first I'm going to enter an RMA from my customer 1100. Now I mentioned that RMA has templates, and you can associate templates with customers. So in the case of customer 1100, I typically do a returns template. And here we can see we have different template codes which can have different processes to default the process around the RMA. For example, you can make the invoice number mandatory, or perhaps the process around whether you typically create credit notes or replacement orders for those particular items. So so you can control the process, different workflow stages for the different processes. But for 1100, I typically do returns, and I typically charge a restocking fee when I do a credit note for these particular returns. So it's defaulted through a miscellaneous charge of $10 as a restocking fee. But as I'm recording this return, I notice that the reminder which is associated with the RMA process to check the Net Promoter Score and to check the credit status of the customer before doing anything or before dealing with the return. And I noticed that my Net Promoter Score is a 5, which is, a detractor. It's not very good. And the comment that they said at that time was that they sent the wrong item. And the last survey was in 2019, and I'm currently in 2020. And in fact, the coloring of this particular note, we changed it to a pink color because the survey is over a year old. So this is, and I know I've done a survey in 2020. So that in itself is telling me something about the customer. So now I'm immediately alerted to the fact that, if they are returning this item because we've sent the wrong item, perhaps I should deal with this return in a different way to the way I normally deal with returns from 1100. And I also noticed somebody's been doing some analysis and noted that there's a downward trend in customer 1100's purchases. And that also it's an indication that this customer is not that happy with your goods or services. So if the customer is saying to me, we sent them the wrong item on, let's say, on invoice number 10, so you can populate your returns based on an invoice. and that is effective in bringing in the invoice number, preventing you having to rekey all this information, but it also brings through the costs and the selling price at that point in time, so you have that information to hand. But I'm also using a document management link to here I've linked a document. I've linked using document management link. I have linked through to the invoice that was produced at the time of sending out those goods. So I don't have to say to the customer, let me go and find the invoice, or let me reprint the invoice to see what we're talking about. I've got it to hand, and just double click would open up that particular document, and I would be seeing the information that the customer is referring to. Regarding the Net Promoter Score, what we could do, and my process is that if I notice that the Net Promoter Score is really old, perhaps they didn't get the email or they overlooked the email for the Net Promoter Score that we did in January 2020. If your process is, you could perhaps have a custom button to email the customer the link to a new survey for them and ask them if they wouldn't mind completing that, if it's appropriate in this particular process. But you could have any number of tasks assigned there. You could just be setting it up for the next time the SurveyMonkey sends it out, or you could be sending a different type of email through to the customer based on noticing that the Net Promoter Score has not been updated for a while. Just looking at the detail of the RMA screen. So per item on an RMA, you can track a number of different fields, and returns process is all about collating all the information in one place. So you have one place to that anyone can answer to the customer what's the status of this RMA, what you're doing with it, whereabouts in the process it is. And I'm using a workflow stage to monitor where the returns is in the process. So at this stage, the customer's just phoned up and said, I'm going to be returning this item, but they haven't yet returned it. So I would print off an instruction, send it through, email it through to the customer to attach to the goods. So when the goods arrive in the warehouse, you know who it's from and why it's coming back in. When the goods arrive, you would say, it's now arrived, and we're just going to put it into the stage of awaiting inspection. And I could use Extender to email the customer at this point to say, thanks for sending back the goods, they've now arrived and we're now inspecting them. So you could have an email alert every time this workflow stage changes and update them where you're up to with that particular process. Or if at least if you're not emailing them, when the customer phones and says where you're up to with this particular return, they can easily see where you're up to. And you can use the comment fields, any number of information that you might be keeping track of around a return around this process. Until at some stage it perhaps gets inspected, you decide, yes, it is going back into stock, or no, you're going to replace it, whatever you're going to do. But you would move the status on, and then you would say, if you're going to replace it at zero charge, you would put it on a replacement order and send it out. Or perhaps the customer's asking for a credit note, and then you would put it on a credit note without the zero charge. But possibly, if we are going to be going ahead and doing a credit note, because of the scenario or the situation that this customer is in, you'd perhaps tell them, well, yes, sorry, we did send you the wrong item, or the right item isn't fit for purpose for you, but in this case, I'm going to waive your restocking fee. And in the hopes that when they do next fill in a Net Promoter Score, they're happier with your service than they were last time. Another kind of RMA that you might be doing, I'm just going to create a new RMA for our customer 1200, and in this case we're going to be doing a repair for customer 1200. So my repairs template, as you notice, doesn't automatically do a restocking fee, but it doesn't make the invoice number mandatory on all lines, and it has a slightly different workflow default status. And looking at the Net Promoter Score for this customer, we noticed that last time they rated us, it was in 2020, so my Net Promoter Score is no longer pink as a warning. The last comment they had was that we're great to deal with, and that the Net Promoter Score was 9. So that's encouraging to know, but it still also informs me where they are and perhaps how I can deal with them in an even better way. And I also noticed that typically when we do repairs for Ronald Black, we have a template set up for them. It's because they're normally repairing the template for repairs on the desk lamp. So I can quickly use the fill by for this particular return based on an RMA document, and I can search for that my template for the returns, the repairs of the desk lamp, and kicking the go button would populate the RMA with the lines that the return normally, a repair of a desk lamp normally has. So it's got a miscellaneous charge for labor, and it's typically we issue 2 of these spare bulbs with the particular repair. So again, I could go ahead and add this document, click F9 and fill in the details when the item comes in to be repaired, what repairs we do, and then when we're finished, create a replacement order to charge the customer for those particular spare parts. But maybe in recognition of the customer, you might offer them 50% off on the labor or something like that. But you have the information to make that decision, and you're empowering your staff to answer that decision accordingly. The Net Promoter Score, how did we go about creating that and having that information in Extender? So in Extender, we went ahead and created a custom table. Our table is called the Net Promoter Score for our customers, because we're also recording Net Promoter Scores on our vendors as well. And on our vendors, how are we as a customer, and is there anything we can do to be better, to improve our stock flow, etc. So in the case of our customers, we're storing the customer ID, the date of the Net Promoter Score, the score, a number between 0 and 10, and the reason why they gave that score. And just looking at some of the responses, 1100 that I showed you, their Net Promoter Score the last time they did it was 2019. It was a 5 because we sent the wrong item. 105, we also sent the wrong item. Sorry, that's 105, it's 7, we sent the wrong item. And 1200, the net in 2019, we sent the wrong item, but 2020, we got a 9, and that's we're great to deal with. So we can use Extender to customize and automatically import these results if you're using a tool such as SurveyMonkey. And we can tailor that process. Process Scheduler perhaps launches the import every night. Any new results in SurveyMonkey, import them so that this information is imported as and when it happens, and always kept up to date for your staff. So Process Scheduler allows you to set up schedules to do as many tasks as you need. All the standard repetitive tasks within Sage 300, for example, your day ends, doing data integrity checks, posting batches, refreshing reports, but also you can be running custom processes. For example, this particular schedule is running 2 different Extender scripts, and these Extender scripts can be your own custom process. It could have been every night check and see if there's any new files from SurveyMonkey and import them, but this particular one is checking to see if our stock is less than the minimum stock set per location, per item, and sending the warehouse manager a warning saying you're below minimum of these items in this location. So that's what I was going to show you off the Sage 300 desktop. But let's now look at Info Explorer, and we'll look first at the Net Promoter Score cube. So this is a cube written on that custom table, and it reads in the Net Promoter Scores that we've done from our surveys of 2019 and 2020, and calculating the Net Promoter Score. So if I look first at my 2019 figures, I notice that in the retail sales group, I've got as many detractors as I have promoters, which gives me a net promoter score. Remember, the calculation of the net promoter score is the percentage of promoters less the percentage of detractors. So a net promoter score of 0, which is unusual and unlikely, and probably more indicative that I've got a very small number of customers in the retail group. But it is encouraging to note that in 2020, you know, all my the majority of my retail customers are now promoters. I have no detractors, giving me a very high net promoter score. But I look also then at the wholesale group, and here I have a slightly different sales and returns process. And I see that as a percentage, you know, we have way less promoters than we do detractors, and a high negative net promoter score. Encouraging to see in 2020, my promoters has increased, the detractors has decreased, giving me a much lower net promoter score, but still a negative promoter score. And if I only looked at the overall company performance, you know, a positive net promoter score is a good thing. So, you know, it would hide the trends that I have in my different customer groups. So you always need to be monitoring and tracking by process. And if the process is different for different customer groups, then you need to analyze it differently. Just another couple of views that I've created in this particular cube. So this is showing me my promoters, so whether they were a promoter in 2019 or 2020. So here we can see Mr. Ronald Black was not a promoter in 2019, but is in 2020. And a calculation done by the cube to show me the change, the absolute change in the years. So just scanning down here quickly, we can see that this is all a positive change, and that's really good. This is a negative change, so I would perhaps want to drill into this customer and see why and this customer, see why you know, the reason for the net promoter score decreasing like that. And I do have the net promoter score the reason that they typed in at the same time, and I'll show you that on another view. So we can see the promoters, we can see the detractors, and again we've used coloring on the raw score. Red is detractor, green is promoter, and 7 is neutral. We can see our passives, and these ones are particularly interesting to look at to see how you can move them up into the positive, to be a promoter. And in this particular case, I've dragged down my NPS reason, and by customer, we can see the reason that they gave in 2019 and 2020. And looking at these in more detail, we could see trends for that particular customer. For example, Bargain Mart, you know, it appears here that they went from 5 to nothing, but that was because there was no score in 2020. But -5, they've gone down in 5. That would be really a good reason to look at the individual reason code and see what you can do to correct that, and perhaps even contact that customer if that was the real case. We can also use Info Explorer to analyze our RMAs, as you can do for your sales or any process that you have. This particular view, for example, is showing me my workflow stage. So how many RMAs do I have, or how many items do I have in the status with the customer, arrived, awaiting inspection, returned from the repair agent, and now at this stage it's got a fault code, so we can see you know, the stage of our particular returns, how many items we have in that stage, and the analyzed as a crosstab with the fault codes of those items. So here it might be useful to drag down the item to actually see which items are in the status, or maybe I'd want to filter my workflow stage and only look at those in a particular a stage or status, and then analyze or look more closely which item has got a cracked casing, which item has got a damaged seal. And you'd perhaps also have a fault code, in inverted commas, a fault code for sending the wrong item out, and you can analyze how many times you send the wrong item out and why you're having to issue credit notes and or returns for the customers. That's really what I wanted to show you as part of the software. So just going back to the PowerPoint presentation. So what I've run through is the RMA process, how you can use RMA processing to deliver a consistent process with improved accuracy around the returns process, providing, using notes, providing the information that you need at that time, how you can have all the information in one place so if the customer does phone in, you can answer quickly and immediately and not say, oh, I better find the invoice and I'll call you back and maybe forget to call them back or whatever can happen on a busy day. So using notes, we displayed the relevant information around the RMA about the customer. Also using document management link, we made the invoice readily available, but if you were shipping out QA information or your delivery information, those documents could have also been associated with the invoice number and could have been readily at hand during the returns process. Using Extender, we created a table to store our Net Promoter Score. We imported our Net Promoter Score, and that was a scheduled task which happened every night. Any new Net Promoter Scores were imported. And using Extender as well, we can vary the color of the note to show when we've got exceptions or issues or problems, to alert people to double check that particular information. We saw how Info Explorer can be used for business intelligence, in particular analyzing the RMAs and the Net Promoter Score survey results. All of this supports your decision on the next process or how you can improve the next process or which process you should be looking at to improve, to increase your customer satisfaction. We briefly looked at Process Scheduler, scheduling tasks to save time. That could be a warning that the stock is below the minimum. It could be a message back to the customer, we were due to ship this item today, but for ABC reason, the shipment has been delayed. As much information as you can give the customer, whether it's good or bad, if you're giving it to them proactively, it improves their experience with your customer service. And we discussed using bin tracking to be able to isolate and find your items in your warehouse more quickly, supporting the picking process, providing better customer service in terms of fulfilling the order accurately and quickly, and EFT processing in processing customer refunds back through to the customer if that is your process. So those are the main things I wanted to discuss today. You are all muted because we're recording this session. So if you've got any questions, would you please pop them in the question box? And while you're popping them in the question box, thank you for attending the session. And I'd just like to draw your attention to our website where you can find all our products, product downloads, training guides, sample data to demonstrate our products. If you click on the YouTube link, you will go through to our YouTube channel where we have a number of sales demos, training demos, and all these webinars that we've been running over the last 6 months are up on that link as well. And just draw your attention to the latest blog that David's done, which is really the basis of this particular presentation, gave me the ideas of which modules to show and how to tailor your system for improving your service to your customer around the returns process in the hopes of getting increased raving fans and higher net promoter scores. So have a look at this article. It's got some interesting links to research that's been done by people in this area and a very clear, concise summary of the net promoter score and managing and monitoring customer satisfaction. So do we have any questions? So a question from Susie, or more of a comment. Thank you for showing the products work together and focusing on customer satisfaction. Thanks for that feedback, Susie. Very, very kind of you. Hope you found it informative. Another question from Anna. Oh, how can we access the recorded session? Thanks for that, Anna. We'll be loading the recorded session up on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days, and we'll also be sending you out a link directly to that. But if you do want to see our other sessions, if you go to our website, click on the YouTube channel link, it will take you through to our YouTube channel, and you will see, you can see we have a playlist of all the webinar recordings that we've done so far. So there's 8 up there at the moment, and we'll be putting it up there, but we'll also be sending you a link on this particular session. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll be closing off this webinar, but thanks very much for attending. We know your time is important, and it's very, very kind of you to attend this session. And we'll send out the link shortly, as I mentioned. And if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to email me at any time. Thanks. Bye.